Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. This is Dr. William Painter for this week's Journey Road Ministries Song and Sermon. The theme this week is, being an outcast. And so I'm going to start off with a song by Townes Van Zandt, who was part of the beginning of what they call the outlaw movement in country music. There's a wonderful documentary about Townes Van Zandt called Heart-Filled Highways, and in it you've got him and Charlie Daniels and David Allan Coe, who is a real character and so on. But Townes Van Zandt was a unique talent, and if you look him up on YouTube, he introduces this song as a medley of his hit. And he basically had one hit, and this is it. It's called Pancho and Lefty. It was done by Willie Nelson and a number of others. I think the Emmylou Harris did a version of it as well. So amongst those luminaries, I'm going to throw my very wee hat into the ring and do this song. Living on the road, my friend, is gonna keep you free and clean. Now you wear your skin like iron and your breasts as hard as kerosene. You weren't your mama's only boy, but her favorite one it seems. She began to cry when you said goodbye and sank into your dreams. Pancho was a bandit, boys. His horse was fast as polished steel. Wore his gun outside his pants for all the honest world to feel. Pancho met his match, on the deserts down in Mexico. No one heard his dying words, and that's the way it goes. And all the federales say they could have had him any day. They only let him hang around out of kindness, I suppose. Lefty, he can't sing the blues all night long like he used to. Dust that Pancho bit down south ended up in Lefty's mouth. The day they laid poor Pancho low, Lefty split for Ohio, where he got the bread to go. Oh, there ain't nobody knows. And all the federales say they could have had him any day. They only let him slip away out of kindness, I suppose. The poets tell how Pancho fell and left his living in a cheap hotel. The desert's quiet and Cleveland's cold, so the story ends, we're told. Pancho needs your prayers, it's true, but save a few for Lefty too. He just did what he had to do, and now he's growing old. A few great federales say they could have had him any day. They only let him go so wrong out of kindness, I suppose. A few great federales say they could have had him any day. They only let him go so wrong out of kindness, I suppose. Pancho and Lefty. Okay, we'll come back after the break. Put this guitar up and we'll talk about something a little more serious. Okay, we're back after the sad, sad ballad of Pancho and Lefty. I'll go into some of that later. Today is some kind of a proper day. I think I laugh about that every time. Proper 23 is what it is. And our gospel reading is short, and it's from Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean, but the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up, go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Thus endeth the gospel. Okay, well, this is another wonderful example of Jesus living on the edge and working on the edge. So he is in the area between Samaria and Galilee, and he's going to Jerusalem. And this whole series of chapters in Luke is focused on Jesus, going to Jerusalem. So we have lepers, and they are marginalized people, and they are outcasts, and leprosy is it's an awful disease, and they ask Jesus to heal him, and he does. He says, "Go show the priests, and you're cleansed." And then this one leper turns around and says, "Thank you." And the word he uses, "thank you," is the same verb that Jesus uses at the Last Supper to thank God for the bread and the wine, the Eucharist. So there's no question about the parallels here between these two stories and saying thank you. And the one who says thank you is further marginalized because he's a Samaritan, and they were just the lowest of the low. And we've seen Samaritans in this text, the Good Samaritan. And so if you want to really bring up someone who's really yuck and bad and dirty and all those kinds of things, it's always a Samaritan. And we've lost that sense. I think in today's lexicon we would talk about homeless or immigrants or African Americans or some kind of prostitutes, some kind of marginalized people that live on the edge. And this one is this is where we find Jesus. He is on the boundaries between Samaria and Galilee, right? He is in the boundaries between accepted mainstream life and the marginalized and ultra-marginalized people. And that's where you find him, and that's where you see him. And if you want to find God, if you want to find Jesus, if you want to find miracles, if you want to find real, true Christianity, that's where you find it. So when I pick out this song by Townes Van Zandt, Townes Van Zandt was a very talented young man. He died at the age of 52 of natural arrhythmia, but he had been addicted to drugs and alcohol his entire life. His younger brother took care of him, was assigned to take care of him and manage him, sort of 24 hours a day. And he reports that Townes Van Zandt would not only shoot up heroin, but he would shoot up cocaine, he would shoot up vodka, he would shoot up rum and coke. He was horribly, irretrievably addicted to drugs. And in our society, in our culture, we shun those people. We say that's a personal problem, that's an illness, that's a sickness, that they should help themselves. And in fact, Townes Van Zandt was in rehab a dozen times, and his contributions were enormous. You probably never heard of him, or maybe you've heard the name in passing, but he influenced Bob Dylan and John Prine and Emmylou Harris, and the influences of his music can be seen. I've got a list of them here. Let's see. Lyle Lovett, Chelsea Wolfe, John Prine, Guy Clark, Devendra Banhart, Nora Jones, Robert Plant, Alison Krauss, Josh Ritter. And by the way, the movie I recommended was Heart-Worn Highways. Heart-Worn Highways, not heartfelt. If you watch it, you'll be heartfelt. But it's Heart-Worn Highways. And it was the last weeks of 1975 and the first week of 1976. So you're seeing Townes Van Zandt kind of at his peak. And he's such a funny guy, and he's such a good humored guy, and he's such a troubled person. And with him in this movie is this old African-American man. And I think you can probably find a clip on YouTube of him singing Pancho and Lefty that's taken out of this documentary. And as he's singing this song of Pancho and Lefty, and he sings another one called "It's Better Than Waiting Around to Die." This old African American man, just tears just rolling down his cheeks, and there's this young beautiful girl who's Townes Van Zandt's girlfriend, and she's comforting him, and and the interior of the house is so familiar to me because this is the kinds of houses that we as young people lived in, and we were marginalized. We lived on the margins. We weren't part of mainstream anything. We might have been college students. We might have been construction workers. We might have been any number of things, but we were not mainstream. And I think, and that's not a medal or a badge that I'm trying to wear. It's a description of a period. And I think all too often we see these people claiming to be Christians, and I know this is a drum I keep beating every time I get in front of this camera, that that you have to be white, it's Christian nationalism, you have to be moral, you have to be anti-abortion because saving human life, and you have to condemn sin and all this kind of stuff. And none of that. You see none of that. You know where Jesus is working, where Jesus can be found? Jesus can be found where all those people who are white Christians would never, ever go. You can't find them there. They're not there. And I have sometimes wondered, and I'll probably get some stick over this, that if you want to go to a place where there's no God, go to a church. Because there's no Jesus in a church. These are all non-marginalized people. These are all mainstream people who go to church so they don't have to help. They don't have to be lift their communities up. They don't have to be bothered by loving their neighbor because they're comfortable with the people that they go to church with. And after having served in a church, and seeing it from the inside out, I realize that this is the one place where there is no God. That you need to get out of that church, and maybe if you're lucky, you go looking and you go to the margins. You will find God and you will find Jesus there. But he's not going to be in the church. That's not going to happen. They don't like women. They don't. But yet Jesus got Mary. Mary Magdalene. That was women who were the first evangelists there. Jesus stands for everything that most of these churches stand against. Now you're going to point out, well, what about this church and what about that church? And that's fine. That's great. I do believe there are certain exceptions that prove the rule. But in my little town, even in the mainstream churches that are here, and there's a part of this little town I live in, and it's just like you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a church. And we got Methodists, and we got Baptists, and we got some non-denominationalists, and you got Congregationalists, and then around the corner we got, I think, Adventists, Episcopalians. Both Episcopalians go to church there. And none of these churches, you go in these churches and they are bereft of God, because these are all mainstream people who probably should spend their time outside of church doing something different and doing something better. So I chose this song of Pancho and Lefty, for one, because it was Townes Van Zandt, and he sort of represents this marginal person who gave us extraordinary blessings of music and influence artists well beyond his own. He didn't write a bunch of hits. He didn't have platinum records. I don't think he ever had a platinum record. But his music influenced all these important artists, and he was just ravaged by drugs and alcohol. And this story of Pancho and Lefty, you think, oh, it's just another cowboy story. But if you listen to the words, Pancho was a bandit. So are we supposed to feel sorry for a bandit? Well, we kind of do, And his horse was fast as polished steel, and he wore his gun outside his clothes for all the honest world to see. And he dies. Meets his match, meets his end on the deserts of Mexico. And Lefty, his partner, somehow got the money to move to Ohio and spend the rest of his days in a cheap hotel. And no one knew where he got that money. And so, but we do, really. I think we kind of do know where he got that money. He either got it from Pancho's stash, or he got it for turning Pancho in. He made it out alive, and he can't sing the blues because he's got the dust that Pancho bit down south in his own mouth. Well, that tells you everything, isn't it? These are marginal people. These are not good, moral, upright people. And yet, when we listen to that song, we feel something for them. And we should, because this is where Jesus wasn't a bandit. Don't oversimplify this. But Jesus was among the bandits. Jesus was among the poor. Jesus was among those who were excluded from the mainstream of society. That's where he spent his days. And when he faced the mainstream, he wagged his finger at them and he upbraided them. And the response of the mainstream was to kill him, was to execute him. Well, on that uplifting note, go spend some time in a homeless shelter. Go spend some time in a food bank. Go spend some time doing something, anything to help. Go spend some time in an abortion clinic. Go spend some time in a daycare. Go do something, anything, to be around people who are marginalized people. Personally, last weekend I went to South Omaha, which is a Latino, Latinx, Hispanic community, and a lot of people there don't speak any English at all. My daughter teaches English to folks over there, and there was a street thing, and there were I had pupuas, I think it was pupusa. I don't even know what it was. It was some kind of a floury, taco-y thing with meat inside that I saw the ladies doing this with it, and I've seen that before. I know what that means. I'm from Texas. They're making tortillas. And so I went over there. I didn't know what I was buying, and I bought something. They were amazingly good. And I went over and got Tara, my partner, and got her a taco, and they just made it right there. And there were dancing, there's music, and all these different people with little bitty babies, and young people and old people, and they all looked different. I mean, some were Indianas, and some were, I don't even know what they were. I don't care what they were. They were extraordinarily interesting, and many of them didn't speak English. And I thought, this is where life happens, right here. Not in West Omaha, where all the white folks stay. This right here is where the food is. It's where the smiles are. It's where the people are. That if I fell down, someone would pick me up. This is where God is. Okay, thank you. It's 14 minutes plus 5-minute song. That's 20 minutes. That's enough of your time wasted. God bless. Have a good weekend. What's left of it. Happy Native American Day. Happy First Nations Day on Monday. And I'll see you on the flip side. God bless.